week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units. I have his sleepers this week. The first one, the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings, on paper, it's a decent matchup, but the Bears give up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. But this Viking team, besides 2 games this year, really haven't done much in terms of fantasy football. Week 4, Carolina, 7 points allowed, 5 sacks, a fumble recovery touchdown. In week 5 versus Kansas City, you obviously didn't expect them to do anything. 27 points allowed and 2 sacks. So right now, on paper, it's a good matchup versus the Bears. But the last 2 weeks, this Bear offense has been putting up points. Last week, 40 points versus the Washington Commanders. And then in week 4 versus the Denver Broncos, 28 points. So this obviously is the deepest of leagues if you need a defense. So right now, this has a potential shootout written all over it with these 2 division rivals. And right now, defense, sometimes it's hard to find a good one. So if you're desperate for whatever reason in deeper leagues, or some teams carrying 2 defenses in your league, the Minnesota Vikings unit is available right now, 90% of fantasy leagues. The next defense DST is the Tennessee Titans. So the Titans, it's a home game for them. They play way better at home than they do on the road as Tennessee over the last few seasons. So believe it or not, this Baltimore Raven offense gives up the 6th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So Tennessee right now available 96% of fantasy leagues. And just to circle the home games this season for this defense, it's been pretty decent. Week 2 versus the Chargers, a high-powered offense, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks. Then week 4 versus Cincinnati, they shut them down, 3 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then last week in Indianapolis, they didn't do anything, 23 points allowed and a sack. But this game, early Sunday morning game overseas, Baltimore, their offense really hasn't been putting up the huge points week in and week out. And we'll see what happens in this one. But right now, if you need a deep dive defense, and with decent numbers for this Tennessee Titan team, with the Ravens, like I said, giving up the 6th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season, I think Tennessee is a sleeper option this week. And the third and final defense DST unit I have as a sleeper this week here is the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams, I know their defense isn't what it was even 2-3 seasons ago, but Aaron Donald's still there. Obviously, he's not as dominant as he was either, but this is a good matchup versus division rival, the Arizona Cardinals. I know the Cardinals, they've surprised people this year and have actually put points on the board more games than not, and this Ram defense really hasn't done much this season. So the last few games for them, week 4 at Indianapolis, 23 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 5 versus Philly, 23 points allowed, a sack and an into. And right here now, Arizona, they've been putting up points, but now without James Conner in the offense and relying on Keontae Ingram and Amari DiMarcito, we'll see if those guys can do anything or add any impact to the running game. I know DiMarcito last week looked pretty decent after James Conner went out with a knee injury. But anyway, this week here, I think this Ram team could carve out a decent ball game. Available 92% of fantasy leagues, and if you need them in deeper leagues, they're a sleeper option this week. So that's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers here for week 6 of the fantasy football season.